This is an educational video on our ecosystem for the DJI Ronin 2. I'm going to be covering off why we developed some of these parts, what the issues with the gimbals were, and how our products solve them. I'll be starting with the exoskeleton, and I'll also be covering accessories for the exoskeleton, such as the shelf, counterweight set, Ronin 2 top crossbar bracket, adjustable accessory mount, and the Ronin-majig. First up, we'll get started with the exoskeleton. The reason why we developed the exoskeleton was we discovered that the Ronin's weak point is actually around the neck here, where it joins onto the roll motor housing. What was happening in extreme cases, this was completely separating and only cables would be left. Other less extreme circumstances, we would notice cracks start developing here. In order to solve that problem, we've gone and developed the exoskeleton. It's a skeleton that fits on the outside here and bolts to some locations on the gimbal. We were using that internally for a while, and we've decided to mass produce it and offer it to the public. And what was interesting was when we did that, a lot of people reached out to us and were very grateful that we made it available, because they too had experienced similar problems, whether it be cracking or total separation, and in some instances, loss of their payload. That's definitely something you want to avoid, and it just gives you that peace of mind. You're going to reduce the likelihood of this totally separating. I'll go ahead and do a quick install video. Exoskeleton is going to come in a box like this. There's a little brochure on some of our other components. You're going to receive some hardware and a manual. Definitely want to read that. So scan the QR code. It's got all the tips and tricks in there. I've got one actually ready to go on the side. Back to the Ronin 2 here. This is a Ronin in its standard form. We're going to be removing this back plate to begin with. Now, you don't want to be doing this with any kind of load on your gimbal. We're going to remove the 4 M3 bolts from the back plate. This will be a 2.5mm hexagonal driver or Allen key. And when you remove the last one there, the plate will just easily separate away. So keep that hardware in a Ziploc bag and tape it to that back plate and keep it away somewhere safe. So you can see the electronics are exposed there. You don't need to touch any of that. And I've got all of the components laid out here as they would come out of the box. I've got the hardware, some brackets. Inside each of these brackets is a injection molded plastic spacer. This is what goes between the metal parts and the carbon fiber, and just prevents it scuffing or marring or damaging the actual gimbal itself. So we're going to install the exoskeleton backplate. Plastic spacer in there. The hardware for this, 4 M3x12 bolts. I recommend putting all of your hardware out neatly so you can see everything during the installation process. 6 M3x12, 10 M3x10, and 14 M4x12. Put in the back plate the M3x12. So we're going to need 4 of those. Just start off with 1 and install it very lightly. So it'll just sit on there now, and almost no gap with that plastic spacer in place. And just do the bolts up very lightly. Okay, so they're in lightly, not tight. This one goes on the top of the pan axis, so you want to use one of these. See how they kind of got this square pattern to the plastic insert. That is going to go curve up, flat bit on the bottom, and curve up on the inside here. Install M3x10s to this. And all of these bolts come with Loctite 243 pre-applied, so you don't need to apply Loctite. That reason that's in the manual was for the first version before we had the pre-Loctited hardware. Okay, so just get all 4 fasteners started. And again, we don't want to tighten anything up very firmly at this point, just very light. And we want to ensure that the gap here and the gap on this side are even. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. There's about a 1mm gap there. Okay, so the back plate and the clamp are in place. Next, we're going to install the top clamp section. So again, plastic pieces inside. This one will be on the underside of the pan axis, and this one will be on the top side with the threaded holes in the sides. This one, we want to have the flat section towards the pan axis and the curved section towards the rear of the pan axis. We want to match the flat spot and the curve to that top clamp side. M3 by 10 fasteners. It's a little bit trickier to get these ones in because your gravity's working against you. And the final one for this clamp going in. Kind of the same process as before. You just want to do these up lightly and make sure the gap on either side is even. Okay, so that's up just lightly at this point, and as you can see, we can still slide this clamp on the pan axis itself. All right, so I'm going to change this 2.5 out for a 3mm, and we're going to put in place these side brackets. They're allocated to a side each. So you want to make sure you get that correct as well. Put in some of the fasteners just lightly, and we're going to move this clamp to make sure that the bracket aligns with the back plate clamp here. This part, it's not even close at this point, but because we left the top clamp loose, we can slide it backwards and get that aligned. And lightly install the fasteners here. Okay, they're all in place, but not tight. Same again for this side. Okay, all fasteners, and there's 6 per side, are in place, and they're still kind of loose. Okay, final stage is to tighten everything up, and we want to make sure we do that evenly. So we do recommend using a torque wrench. I've got a Wera torque wrench here, or Vera, however you say it, and we recommend a torque of 1.5 Newton meters. If you don't have a torque wrench, that's okay. You just need to do it up firmly. It's important to start with the back plate first, and then we'll move over to the clamps. We still want to make sure this is pulled up evenly. You can still see the gap through this space here. So keep an eye on that. I'm pulling it up slowly, and then I'll do the final torque once the gap is even. Okay, and we'll move over to this clamp on the top of the pan axis here. Again, keeping everything pulling up evenly. You can see the gap through the sides here. Okay, change out the 2.5 for the 3mm, and we do the 6 bolts on either side. Cool, and that concludes the installation of the exoskeleton. From time to time, you want to check the hardware, just due to the nature of the gimbal and how it moves. This hardware could loosen up, so you want to check that periodically or re-torque it. So that's our base exoskeleton. Now we do have accessories for the exoskeleton, one being the exoskeleton shelf. And the shelf is there for anything really, but probably the most common piece of equipment you would install to it is a video transmitter. That can be installed upright, upside down, left or right, however you like it. This mounting pattern is it's totally symmetrical. So just 4 countersunk M4 bolts to put this guy on. Again, just put them all in loosely and then tighten them all up. And there you go. Just like that, you've got a shelf on there. And that shelf, yeah, essentially allows you to bolt on a video transmitter. You could put it vertically like that with a 1/4 inch screw from underneath. And you can also go in upside down as well, depending on how you want to configure it. So a bit of flexibility there. Obviously you can mount anything else you want on there too. There's just a few slotted holes which will take a 1/4 inch hardware. Moving on now, we have another accessory for this exoskeleton, and that is the counterweight set. So counterweight set here, we've got some wings, and we include the hardware as well. So the counterweight wings allow you to, well, they solve the problem when you have a really big camera package and you've got a lot of weight hanging out the front here. You need to counterbalance it around the axis, the pan axis. So there are times where you hit that limit. Running big lenses, big physical camera bodies, a lot of accessories. Yeah, so we essentially just gave the exoskeleton the capability to add a bunch of weight onto the back. And we have these 1/4 inch screw-in weights, which are pretty common around the globe, but we do sell them all separately as well. And these are 160 grams each, so you can stack these up and you could really go crazy if you wanted to and put like 5 or 6 in a stack. So anyway, I'll jump over and install these quickly. So you just want to remove the bolt in the middle of the 3, the middle bolt. I hope that makes sense. So remove that. We're going to actually put that aside. We'll remove this side as well, because we're going to replace it with the longer fastener that comes with the counterweight wings. And you'll see here there's like a funky shape on the wing itself, and that locates into the features on the exoskeleton there. So you'll see the text, the laser mark text, will actually go to the forward end of the gimbal. Put the hardware in there. That's an M4 by 16. Put it into place and screw that in. And you can just tighten that up straight away, or you can use a torque wrench. It's just the single piece of hardware there. Same deal for the other side. Locate it, screw it, and then yeah, you can just screw in a counterweight, top or bottom, however you like. This also, you know, it's just a 1/4 inch thread, so you could put an action camera, you could put any type of other accessory on there, really. Get creative. And yeah, that's weights to screw in there, so you can go up or down, doesn't really matter. It's worth noting that this whole exoskeleton assembly on the gimbal, it will fit in the case with a very minor modification to the foam. However, these counterweight wings will likely have to come off because they just protrude too much when the gimbal lays down. Next product is the Ronin-majig. Now, the Ronin-majig is a safety bracket which bolts onto the underside of the pan axis here. So there's 2 bolts. Put the cage in this orientation. Again, you don't want to have any payload on your gimbal at this point. This is the Ronin-majig here. It's in a bag. It's got some installation instructions. It's got a little piece of paracord with it. So that's the Ronin-majig right there. This bracket is going to bolt underneath the pan axis right here. So we're going to remove the 2 bolts on the side where the lock is. And what this Ronin-majig bracket allows us to do is put a safety cable from the pan axis to the camera body directly. So if there was ever the extreme case where the gimbal separated at the roll axis, it's going to catch it and it's not just going to fall to the ground. So again, just another peace of mind. We actually developed this Ronin-majig before we completed the exoskeleton because we hadn't come up with the final solution yet, and we didn't want to completely total whatever camera package we had on there if the gimbal let go. So we pull out that hardware, keep that in a safe place with your back plate. Do recommend applying some Loctite 222 or 243 to these fasteners. These are 2.5mm hex to install. Get both bolts into place, but don't tighten them. Once they're both all the way in, you want to tighten them up pretty firmly. The standard hardware is quite snug. We don't have a torque value for these, but yeah, just go pretty on the firmer side of firm. And that's all there is in terms of the installation process. We do have this piece of paracord, and essentially what you can do is just tie a bow line. You can also use your own safety cables if you have them. I like to do a bow line, and then that other free end you can go to wherever, whatever you want to keep safe. All right, next cool product. We have the top crossbar bracket. We've got a parallel plate and a perpendicular plate. If you want to change between these, you need a 3mm hex driver. You can remove these 2 bolts and transfer it over to the perpendicular plate or the parallel plate. So yeah, you can swap between parallel plate or perpendicular plate, depending on where you want your mounting holes on this crossbar. The reason why we developed it was so that we could actually put an action camera on the front, or I think most importantly, a cine tape, because there was never anywhere for ACs to mount cine tapes, and it was coming up with pretty unruly solutions to that. So, quick example, screw the clamp piece into it. You can put this into the top bar, like so, and just tighten up these firmly. And what happens here is this stainless steel piece is a wedge, and it pushes down against these brass pieces, and the brass pieces splay out, and it holds this in place really securely. So you can put cine tape or horns on there. We've got 1/4 inch threaded holes and a through hole for a countersunk bolt there. And yeah, you can put that guy back on. Here's like an action camera mount. You know, it's sometimes cool to get a POV from the lens perspective with a GoPro or 360 camera. And yeah, it's got their little small rig and ARRI anti-twist dowel pin slots as well. So whatever accessory you put into that will be compatible and won't twist. That's a very handy but small piece of equipment. And again, you could put this one on where you've got the mounting holes laterally, so not just the one sticking straight out the front. Next up, and last up, as part of our ecosystem, we have our adjustable mount for the Ronin 2. So this is what it includes. That's the main assembly, and then it comes with some other components. So what we've got going on here, this is the same profile as the vertical part of the cage here. So what you can do, this is all toolless. You can open it up. I just need to make a quick adjustment to this because this is brand new out of the bag. Adjust the clamping force, so you can put this accessory mount onto the cage, and it can go below the roll axis or above the roll axis. It can go on either side, it can go on the tops, wherever. And that's a quick solution. You can just reposition these thumb screws if you need to get them out the way. And you can also do this. So what we've got going on here is the adjustable part of it in the middle, so it's kind of like a little snake. And the reason why we did that is you can see this kind of like section of the gimbal here where it's angled and it comes out towards the roll axis. Quite often with a straight bracket, something will foul there when you tilt the cage. So what we can do is we can move whatever accessory that is, whether it be a video transmitter or an MDR, we can move that inwards or down or underneath the camera, on top of the camera. Or you could put it out the front and put like an action camera or anything else really. Just gives you the flexibility to mount in all of this volume. So it's going to come installed with this kind of like cheese plate accessory where it's just got 1/4-inch holes going perpendicular to each other, so you can put this through anyway. Now there might be a little bit of a burr just after the anodizing process, so you might just have to kind of work the screw back and forth. And that's something we're looking to fix on the next batch. So yeah, this can essentially get it onto the cage like so. Snug it up. I like to reposition the bolt just to keep it looking neat. And yeah, for example, I want to put my accessory onto that. I'm going to get my video transmitter and I'm going to put it just in there next to the camera body. And screw it into this video transmitter. And you've got a nice rigid setup there. And yep, like I said before, you can reposition the screw. You can open it up, you can move it this way, that way. You could put the video transmitter perpendicular to that. You could put it up the top of the cage. You could put that upside down. It really opens up a lot of mounting options there. Super, super handy piece of kit. Just back on that, you will need to maybe adjust this one screw from time to time just to get the clamping force even on the cage. When we ship them, we just tighten it all the way down so it doesn't rattle loose. Next up is this other bracket here. This is a sliding bracket. Oh, we do give you the option to have like a screw with cross holes versus this kind of like repositionable thumb screw. So we got the two options here. That's the two options. This one's repositionable and that one's got like a cross drilled hole, so you can put an Allen key through there and tighten it up. And if you want to change out between this perpendicular kind of cheese plate to the sliding hole mount, I forget what we call it on the website, but you get the idea. Just basically just put it in there like that, put it back together. Super quick to change out. Also, this is perpendicular to that end, so if you wanted to put the sliding mount kind of like at a different, perpendicular to where it is now, that's very easy to do. And there you go. So we've got that. This is actually really helpful if you want to add a counterweight, for example. Changing lenses a lot and you kind of know like what your different setups are. You can put this counterweight onto the tilt axis and you could like balance your gimbal using weights on this essentially. So sturdy enough to handle that kind of use case. There was one other accessory that I put on the other table over there and I totally forgot to mention, but it is very important. And that is our battery strap bracket. And this is actually our first titanium part. It's very cool. It's very light and extremely strong. So it comes with the hardware and the titanium bracket, which has been colored or anodized black, and a strap. So where this goes, on the top of the pan axis here. Now the issue is, you get the battery block, you put it on, and this actually moves independently of the pan axis. You see that wiggle there? Now, this can cause issues where you're tuning your gimbal and this is moving independently. So when your gimbal's trying to stabilize itself, this is actually oscillating at a different frequency. And that can make things really bad. So our bracket aims to solve that by strapping the battery assembly itself to the pan axis. So what you want to do is get a 3mm hexagonal driver, remove the two bolts on the rear of the pan axis top here, keep those if you ever want to convert it back. And the cool thing is, we actually put some threaded holes in the top of this part, so you can just store them there. And then you're not having to look around for them in the future. So those 2 bolts are just stored in there. There's 2 extra threaded holes for it. And use these M4 by 20 fasteners, which will just go back into those holes where we took the bolts out of. Do those both up lightly and then do them up quite firmly. So watch this. Now we put the battery block on. We pull the strap around it. You can feed it back through that. I don't actually think you need to take it all the way out, but what you want to do is pull that forward, snug it up, and then come over and strap it down. Now, that eliminates that side-to-side move. And that's really going to help with when you tune the gimbal. You're not going to get that moving independently, and I've seen it shake like crazy sometimes, so this is a solution for that. Great, so that concludes the video on our ecosystem components for the Ronin 2. I hope you guys have learned something today. Any of these products that I've touched on today, you can find on our website or our web store. It's XM2store.com.au. So yeah, get on there and check it out. I'm going to be trying to do a couple more educational type videos with other products that we have. One is for the FreeFly Ultra X and some are for the Inspire 3. So subscribe for more of that if you're keen to learn a bit more about these cool upgrades that we make and use.